Before we get into the video, could everyone please subscribe to my Endless Diary Tales channel? Thank you so much. I went outside to take a look. The auspicious hour had already passed. Yet, the groom's family still hadn't picked up the bride. My parents and our relatives were anxious, pacing back and forth, taking turns standing at the entrance of the village, looking down the road in hope. After several hours of waiting, a few people were sent to the neighboring village to ask about the Lee family. When they came back, the news made everyone's faces pale. The Lee family had called off the engagement. My father was so furious that he slammed the table and stood up abruptly. "This is outrageous. They're deliberately trying to disgrace my daughter," he shouted. He immediately asked the matchmaker to go with him to the Lee family's house to demand justice. But when they got there, the gate was locked and barred from the inside, and no one answered their calls. My parents returned home both angry and exhausted, and soon after, they fell ill from the stress. When I was reborn, I came back a little late, just in time to see them lying weak and pale on their beds, their faces full of sorrow and worry because of me. Yet instead of despair, my heart was filled with relief and gratitude. In my previous life, I had carried the dowry my parents had spent years saving and married into the Lee family. I had been a beautiful wife, a respectful daughter-in-law, and patient toward my husband's younger sister. The Lees were poor, and I had to shoulder all the household and social responsibilities alone. In 1995, my sister-in-law, Anna Lee, wanted to study abroad. To help her, I sold the 4-unit courtyard house that was under my name to gather enough money. With the generous dowry and the connections I had, my husband Jason Lee quickly rose in his career, and eventually became a successful and influential man in North City. From a nameless rural family, the Lees became part of the new urban elite. Everyone said I was a good wife who brought luck and prosperity to her husband and family. Everyone except Jason. Our marriage crumbled in the later years, filled with his anger and accusations. "Joanna," he shouted, "I regret marrying you. You lent money to Diana so she could have an abortion. You ruined her life." By then, Jason had already brought Diana, the woman who had once left him, back into his life. The two of them appeared everywhere, hand in hand, smiling sweetly as if I didn't exist. My mother-in-law and sister-in-law would gently persuade me. "Joanna dear, you need to be more understanding. Times have changed. It's normal for wealthy men to have other women. Jason still keeps you as his legal wife. That means he still cares." Even my son took his father's side. "Mom, don't be so harsh. Aunt Diana can't have kids. I'm not fighting for inheritance or anything. Just let Dad give her a proper status. You don't know how hard it is for me to deal with Dad, Grandma, and Aunt Anna. Do you think it's easy for me? I didn't even know what I was supposed to feel anymore. All I knew was that every time my aging parents saw the scandals about Jason on the news, their hearts broke a little more. My father, a former soldier who used to say that men bleed but don't cry, would secretly wipe away his tears at night when no one was watching. He passed away still restless, unable to find peace. That failed marriage had torn my family apart. All the glitter and glamour on the surface were nothing more than a beautiful cloak covering a decaying heart. No one could see the humiliation and quiet pain festering inside me. So this time when I came back to life while everyone was furious cursing Jason Lee for being heartless and abandoning me on our wedding day, I felt strangely lighthearted because now everything could still be changed. While my parents were leading people to the Lee family's house to demand an explanation, I quietly went to the marriage registration office in town to retrieve the marriage certificate that hadn't been stamped yet. In my previous life on my wedding day, I had forgotten to bring the notarized copy of the documents. The kind-faced clerk had told me gently, "Just leave your file here and bring the document later. I'll stamp it for you so you won't have to make another trip." This time I came prepared. I had a few milk candies in my pocket, and when I handed over the unstamped certificate through the glass window, I also passed her the candies. Bowing my head, tears filling my eyes, I whispered, "Thank you so much. Really, thank you." On my way back, as the car drove past a narrow and quiet alley, I caught sight of a familiar figure. Jason Lee holding Diana tightly in his arms, his face radiant with joy. "This time," Jason said softly, "I won't let you face it alone anymore. I'll take responsibility and be the father." Diana blushed shyly, her delicate hand lightly pounding his chest again and again. Then her gaze accidentally met mine. She froze instantly, panic flashing across her face. I turned away coldly, refusing to give her even a glance. In my previous life, Jason had always believed that the child in Diana's womb was his. Only she and I knew the truth. It wasn't. That child belonged to her university professor, a married man refined and charming, who had swept her off her feet at first sight. Their affair, despised by society, burned wildly like a feverish dream. Later, for the sake of reputation and career, that man chose to go abroad with his wife, quietly abandoning her without a word. Terrified and desperate, after discovering she was pregnant, Diana turned her sights on her backup plan, the ever-loyal Jason. She got him drunk, intending to make things irreversible, but I happened to catch them in time and stopped it. Diana fell to her knees before me, crying and begging. "Joanna, please, I'm begging you. Give me a way out. I'll borrow some money from you to end the pregnancy. I promise I'll disappear after that. I'm just using Jason's name as my classmate. I swear no one will ever know." I don't remember what I was thinking at that moment. Maybe it was sympathy for another woman or pity for someone who had been wronged by love. Either way, I kept the secret. When Jason woke up, he thought he had spent the night with his first love, the woman he had never forgotten. Later, when he learned that Diana had lost the baby and could no longer have children, he was distraught for a few days before finally accepting it. At that time, he had just started his career and still relied heavily on his father-in-law's influence. But our marriage then was still filled with affection. Later though, Jason began to resent me, accusing me of using power to crush his love, claiming I had ruined his true happiness. His hatred ran so deep that he spent years smearing my name before the public, determined to see me fall. In the end, none of the three of us, Jason, Diana, or I, won anything. Now, everyone had returned to where they belonged, as if fate had finally put things back on track. Ever since Jason abandoned me on our wedding day, my father had carried a deep sense of guilt toward me. Back then, he had given me 2 suitors to consider. When he looked at Jason, he had said, "That young man isn't ordinary." And indeed, he wasn't wrong. In my previous life, Jason became famous across the country for his achievements. But no matter how talented he was, I no longer wanted him. I thought about it carefully. In this world, every woman eventually gets married. 15 years from now, even the most independent, strong-minded women who swear off marriage will still face endless gossip, let alone me living in this time and place. Since marriage was inevitable, I would choose the safest man to spend my life with. When I told my father I wanted to marry Andrew, he was stunned for a long while before saying, "Sweetheart, think carefully this time. You don't have to hang your heart on just those 2 men. I'll find someone better for you." But I shook my head firmly. "No, Dad. It has to be him." He frowned. "Then ask him first if he's even willing to marry you." I remembered how things had gone in my previous life. I couldn't be completely sure, but I believed he would agree. Back then, when Andrew found out I was about to marry, the tall, suntanned soldier had run all the way to find me, sweat pouring down his temples. But when he saw me dressed in a bright red wedding gown, he said nothing, just turned and walked away. After that, every year I received a small sum of money and packages of daily necessities. They all came from the same place, though the address was hidden. I eventually traced them back to the military base where Andrew had been stationed. 15 years later, the letters and packages suddenly stopped. I thought he had finally moved on, maybe started a family of his own. I was even genuinely happy for him. It wasn't until many years later that I learned the truth. Andrew had died long ago. His name was carved on a tombstone in a national cemetery. Beside it, there was a small line of words. "To the one I will love forever, Joanna." Some people threw me away like garbage, and some used their entire limited lifetime to love me with all their heart. Lifting my head, I looked at the man sitting stiffly in front of me. In my previous life, this was the day he had turned his back and left me. But in this life, for reasons I couldn't yet understand, he stood guard in front of my house again. His eyes fixed on me with quiet persistence, never looking away. "Andrew," I said at last, "let's just call it fate. I want to get married and you're still single, so why don't we just pair up?" He smiled, the sharp lines of his brows softening into a look full of warmth. "Fate? No, this isn't bad luck at all. I couldn't be happier. To escape the people in the places that disgusted me, I asked my parents to move with me into the 4-unit courtyard house in North City. It had been my mother's dowry, untouched since the day she brought it home. In my previous life, Jason's younger sister, Anna Lee, had been desperate to study abroad. Jason had worn a sullen look, objecting, while my mother-in-law wrapped herself in a blanket and cried. The house was constantly in chaos. Anna had come to me sobbing, clinging to my sleeve, pleading, "Please, sister-in-law, think of something to help me. I only need 300,000. You can find a way, can't you?" But what could I do? In the Lee family, some played the villain and others pretended to be kind, each taking turns to wear me down, forcing me to sell my house without ever saying it outright. Even in the 1990s, word getting out that a husband's family had taken a daughter-in-law's dowry would have been shameful. That 4-unit courtyard, perfectly intact, was sold for over 600,000. Anna took 300,000 to study abroad. The rest Jason used for business and to expand his social network. When I later wanted to buy it back, the price had skyrocketed. So high, even Jason hesitated to consider it. And for him, spending that kind of money for me was, of course, not worth it. Now that same house was under my name, gifted to me by my mother. The entire courtyard was beautifully decorated in bright red, filled with the warmth and joy of celebration. Andrew and I stood side by side holding our marriage certificate. As both families looked on, we bowed to heaven and earth, to our parents, and became husband and wife. Tears glistened in the eyes of our parents. But right after the ceremony, Andrew received an urgent military assignment. Regretfully, he said he might only have time to come home for our wedding night. Before leaving, he handed over all his assets to me, repeating his instructions again and again. Seeing the worry in his eyes, I smiled gently. Rising on my tiptoes, I pressed a soft kiss on his lips and whispered, "I'll be waiting for you to come home." His strong hands tightened around my waist. His voice was low and rough. "All right." I thought I would give Andrew all of my loyalty and trust. I wanted to do better than in my previous life, to love him more sincerely, more calmly, and more wholeheartedly. But I never expected that the Andrew of this life and the quiet, reserved man from before would be two completely different people. In my past life, the number of times I saw him could be counted on one hand. Whenever we met, he said little, his dark, sunlit eyes burning briefly across mine before he turned away. I had never sensed any other emotion from him. I once thought he needed a calm, gentle, proper wife, and I was confident no one could play that role better than me. But someone please explain to me who this man is now. Burning with passion, bold and unrestrained, always clinging to me as if he couldn't bear to be apart. Since the day he returned from that mission, I'd hardly stepped out of bed for an entire week. Every time I tried to resist, he only smiled, caught my leg, and lifted it over his shoulder, answering my protests with another wave of heated madness. After our wedding, both sets of parents moved in with us. My mother and mother-in-law got along surprisingly well, each even buying a house next door. My father and father-in-law played chess, knitted scarves, and cooked together every day. They never interfered in our marriage. They only observed quietly with subtle care. Lately, though, the dining table had been filled with special dishes. Fried eggs with chives, spicy stir-fried kidneys, and ginseng chicken soup. My face grew redder each day, my head lowering lower at every meal. While Andrew, shameless as ever, was the only one unfazed. He'd eat leisurely and comment, "Mom, the chicken soup's a little salty today," and, "Dad, the fish tastes a bit muddy. Next time, keep them in the pond a few days longer before cooking." No matter what he said, both parents would nod happily. Then he'd flash me that smug grin and murmur, "All thanks to your good fortune, sweetheart." At this rate, if I wished for the jade rabbit on the moon, Dad even insisted on tasting every dish himself before serving it to Andrew, making sure the seasoning was just right. My parents had long since prepared themselves for the thought that he might spend his life alone. Embarrassed, I pinched Andrew sharply on the waist, but he didn't even flinch. Instead, he leaned close to my ear and whispered with a teasing smile, "Honey, you should kiss me a few times here too. Every time I'm away on duty, I rely on the memory of that feeling, just to remember what it's like to have you close." While I waited for him at home every month, right on the same day, I received a parcel and a handwritten letter from him. Inside were wildflowers he'd picked and dried from the mountains, seashells gathered from distant shores, breathtaking landscape photos, and pages filled with loving words. "Joanna, the flowers on the mountain have bloomed again," he wrote once. "But they're not as beautiful as you, not as bright as you. Joanna," I whispered, "I love you into a seashell. Can you hear my voice in it, Joanna? Even the clouds in the sky look like your silhouette. I miss you so much, Joanna. I love you, Andrew." He arranged every part of my life with precision and care, making sure everything was stable and complete. I no longer had to rush about like I did in my previous life, struggling to manage the family's finances or prepare meals for everyone. I didn't have to worry about my sister-in-law's grades or make daily tonic soups for my mother-in-law. I didn't have to wake up before dawn to serve breakfast, nor stay up late to knit sweaters by candlelight. Like my grandmother, I had always been gifted with skillful hands. No matter how intricate a pattern or complex a technique was, I only needed a glance to understand and recreate it perfectly. In my previous life, Jason's superior had been a stylish, free-spirited woman who adored the latest fashion designs from Hong Kong, Macau, and Taiwan magazines. Jason had begged me to help him by making clothes for her. At that time I had just given birth and was still weak, but I painstakingly stayed up for nights cutting and sewing garments that matched her taste exactly. Because of that, she ordered custom pieces from me every year and was never disappointed. Later, whenever Jason encountered difficulties, she would willingly lend him her support, even without me asking, helping him rise smoothly in his career and build the foundation of his business empire. But after she retired, Jason didn't even visit her once, not even a phone call. When I brought her a newly finished coat one day, the legendary woman was lying on a wicker chair on her porch. She looked at me with a smile that carried both fondness and sadness. "Joanna, you're far too kind," she said softly. "That heart of yours. I worry about it." Thinking of all the kindness and thoughtfulness Andrew had shown me, I wanted to do something for him in return. I'd heard that the mother of his commanding officer, a refined and elegant lady, had a particular love for handmade silk chip pow. So during one of Andrew's few breaks at home, I worked day and night to sew a few as gifts. When I presented them to him, my eyes were red from exhaustion. Andrew pressed his lips together, and his own eyes grew misty. "Honey," he said quietly, "I can earn my own future. I married you so you could live in peace and happiness. Believe me, I'll do my best. You have such talented hands. Whether you treat it as a hobby or a career, I'll always support you. Just don't push yourself because of me. I don't want it to become a burden for you." Looking at his bright, lively face, so different from the cold, sorrowful photo on the tombstone etched in my memory, my heart overflowed with love so strong it almost hurt. I opened my mouth to say something, but instead I suddenly gagged. Then it hit me. I was pregnant. The news left Andrew and both our families stunned, but the shock quickly turned into uncontainable joy. My in-laws immediately drove back to their ancestral home to light incense and bow before the family shrine, giving thanks to the ancestors for blessing their unfilled son with the ability to finally continue the family line. Before returning to his unit, Andrew couldn't resist boasting, "Dad, the one you should really be bowing to is my wife. Without her, the Turner family would have gone extinct." He didn't even finish his sentence before my mother-in-law chased him out with a feather duster. Laughing, he left reluctantly for duty. My in-laws weren't distant toward me at all. On the contrary, they became even more attentive and caring. They'd heard that free-range eggs from the countryside were far more nutritious than those sold in the city. My mother-in-law immediately invited my mother to take the car back to our old village. That night, before we even reached the gate, I heard my father roar from inside the house. "That bastard! I'll kill him. He deliberately ran off to disgrace our family, and now he dares to smear Joanna's name. He's asking for death." My mother hurried inside, soothing my father while trying to explain to me what had happened. On their way back from the Lee village, they'd run into Jason Lee's mother. Back in the day, her family had fled and made us lose face. Now she had the nerve to scold us for not bringing her medicine, saying her supply was gone. She sneered that it was lucky Jason hadn't married me. What a worthless family. She even said his little sister was already in university and rudely demanded why we hadn't sent her money last month. What a bunch of ungrateful ingrates. She added that Jason's father had seemed decent before, but who knew his relatives would be so disgraceful? My mother took a sip of water and sighed. My mother-in-law, having heard everything, didn't say much. She only feared there might be lingering resentments in their hearts, even though we hadn't hidden the truth. But anyone hearing that a daughter-in-law had been left at her own wedding would feel upset. If my tone's a bit sharp lately, she told me, please be patient a little. My father, looking at Andrew and thinking he was a good man, said it would be fine after some time. Hearing that only made my father angrier. My daughter did nothing wrong. At worst she can divorce. I can raise my granddaughter myself. With that he fell silent and the mood dropped. I felt uneasy, not knowing whether my mother-in-law had told Andrew about this. And if he knew, would he think I'd married him reluctantly? Would he be angry? Probably. Tormented by those thoughts, I tossed and turned and barely slept. The next morning, my mother-in-law didn't cook or bring food over, and I couldn't tell whether I felt sad or relieved. I also noticed my parents weren't home. Before I could free myself from those wandering thoughts, a commotion burst out in the yard. This time we'll let it slide. But next time you speak nonsense again, I'll break your son's legs, someone shouted. Yes, sir. Of course. We came with him because Andrew is not at the house to look after his wife. If you can't even handle this little thing, how could I still be your elder sister? Yes, that's right. Joanna is such a good person being slandered by that sharp-tongued woman. If it were me, I'd be furious. Next time I see her, I'll tear her mouth apart. Oh my, I'd forgotten to cook for Joanna. What if the poor girl goes hungry? It's all your fault. I told you we'd come back right after moving the things. Where are the hens and the basket of eggs I bought? Who's holding them? Bring them here now. Here, madam. The eggs are all intact. Not a single one cracked. Someone called and I hugged them tightly. Only then did my mother-in-law explain. When she heard Jason's mother say those things that day, she hadn't taken it to heart at all. She hadn't answered back because she was afraid of breaking the basket of eggs. Hens lay fewer eggs in winter, and she'd gone house to house to gather enough to bring as nourishment for me. As soon as she got home with the eggs, she told my father-in-law and the others, and together they went to demand justice. The whole group smashed through the Lee house and caused a ruckus, then reported the matter to the police and the village secretary. In the end, Mrs. Lee was forced to admit she had fabricated the rumor that Joanna had slept with her son long ago. My mother-in-law, who was a retired teacher and had never minded her image before, grabbed that woman by the hair and slapped her repeatedly while scolding. Joanna is such a good girl. Your son doesn't know how to cherish her. Your whole family must be blind. And if I ever hear you slander my daughter-in-law again, I'll tear your mouth to pieces. She then shoved several bills into my hand. This is the compensation she owes for your honor, she said along with a written apology. When the police arrived, Mrs. Lee went pale, weeping and begging, claiming she'd been possessed and said horrible things. Joanna, don't be afraid. If Andrew isn't home, your parents and I will protect you. When my parents heard the news, they rushed over, both shocked and regretful, scolding my in-laws for not taking them along. But my mother-in-law waved her hand in a bold, confident way and said, our daughter-in-law was bullied. This is our family's matter. We can handle it ourselves. 5 years later, I met Jason Lee and Diana again on a busy street in Deep City. It was clear from one glance that Jason had used his second chance at life to climb to the top, rising as fast as a kite caught in the wind. The two of them were dressed in fashionable clothes, stepping out of a shiny, luxurious car. When they saw me standing by the roadside waiting for a cab, their faces immediately filled with smug superiority. Jason frowned coldly, his expression tense. Joanna Turner, I just sent that letter 3 days ago, and you've already shown up. So you really have been following me all this time. He sighed impatiently, tossed a business card at me and said, fine. I don't feel like talking here. Come to this address tonight. I have a job for you. Diana glanced at me with a flicker of disdain in her eyes, biting her lip as if resentful, then shot me a scornful look. Before I could even respond, the two of them had already gotten into the car and sped away. A few minutes later, little Tony, Andrew's colleague from the unit, pulled up, breathing hard. Sister-in-law, there was some urgent business at the base. I came a little late, didn't I? I waved him off calmly. No, I just got here too. Let's go. That was 4 years ago. As I stepped into the car, I casually threw Jason Lee's business card into a trash bin by the street. 4 years ago, I gave birth to a baby girl named Hannah. Around the same time, Andrew received new orders. He was being stationed in Deep City, thousands of miles away from home. Neither my in-laws nor my parents could bear to part with their granddaughter, and they didn't want Andrew and me to live apart either. We all hesitated, not knowing what to do. I wasn't in a rush. While caring for Hannah, I studied for the university entrance exam and was eventually accepted into the medical department. This year, Hannah entered kindergarten and already had her own little group of friends. She was so pampered by both sets of grandparents that she had grown fearless of heaven and earth alike, fully used to the climate and life in North City. She absolutely refused to follow me to Deep City. After discussing it with her, I decided to let her stay with her grandparents while I brought my university admission notice to reunite with Andrew in Deep City. Maybe the experiences of my past life had left a deeper scar than I realized. But even though I still loved crafting, I could no longer touch scissors or needles. Every time I tried, anxiety would seize me. Gradually, I found my passion shifting toward medicine. "Honey," Andrew encouraged me, "you have such skillful hands. If you can't hold a needle for embroidery, hold a scalpel instead. Whatever you choose, I'll support you." After earning my degree, I applied to the Military Medical Corps and was assigned to the Army Hospital in Deep City. Today was my first day reporting for duty. I never imagined that on my very first day in such a large city, I would run into the two people I least wanted to see. Jason's words meant nothing to me. Neither he nor Diana could stir a single ripple in my heart anymore. Andrew and I continued our work and our life together, completely unconcerned about whatever chaos might be happening in Jason's world. Jason, however, was growing restless. He kept glancing at his watch, pacing anxiously. "It's almost 8 o'clock. Why isn't Joanna here yet?" he muttered. In a few days, Director Gao would be visiting, and he needed to make a good impression. He remembered clearly how much he had suffered under her supervision when he first started his career. It wasn't until 3 years later, thanks to Joanna's impeccable tailoring skills and designs that perfectly matched Director Gao's taste, that he finally began to rise through the ranks. This time, Jason had deliberately arranged for Joanna to arrive in his life earlier than she had in the previous timeline, confident that he would soon win the director's favor again. Thinking of her, his lips curled into a cold, mocking smile. "That woman is still the same as before," he thought, "utterly devoted to me. Well, that's fine. I'll just keep her at a distance for a few years, let her suffer a little humiliation, and then I'll marry her. After all, in the last life, she did take care of my mother and sister so well that both of them adored her. She had even given birth to a brilliant son for me, one who mirrored Jason in every way. In this life, though, I'd saved Diana, and she had borne me a son too. But the boy looked nothing like me." Thinking about it, Jason felt a wave of nostalgia for his past life. Though he wasn't sure whether he missed that son or the feeling of sitting high above everyone else, being praised and flattered by all. The idea of being reborn to correct his regrets was, of course, appealing. But having to start everything from scratch was another matter entirely. For now, he was just a mid-level official with some money and a temporary title, still far from the power he'd once held. But that was fine. Joanna was about to reappear in his life. Once she helped him win Director Gao's favor again, and once he sold the house in North City for startup capital, he could begin rebuilding his empire. With the knowledge and experience he still retained from before, 15 years' worth of foresight, he was confident that his rise this time would be even greater than before. As for what his mother and sister had told him, that Joanna had already married another man, Jason didn't believe a word of it. That had to be a lie fabricated by her family to save face after he'd humiliated her by fleeing on their wedding day. On this point he was absolutely certain. Joanna was the kind of woman who, once she loved someone, would give everything, heart, soul, and devotion to that person. That was why, even though he planned to keep his first love, Diana, as his mistress, his legal wife still had to be Joanna. After all, no one suited the role of his wife better than she did. Diana smiled brightly, sitting across from me, and said in a sweet voice, "Miss Turner, you should try this coffee. The beans are all hand-ground from Brazil. The flavor's really rich." I truly had no idea what these two were trying to pull. I'd only gone out to buy a few household essentials and had somehow run into Diana, who was clearly waiting to ambush me. What awful luck. She took a sip of her coffee, hesitated, then looked at me with feigned sincerity. "Joanna," she said softly, "I've been waiting for you here for days. The last time when you didn't come to our house, I thought maybe you'd lost Jason's card and would come here looking for it. I never thought I'd actually run into you today. Joanna, our son Jason's and mine, he's already 4 years old now. You should come visit sometime. What happened before was our fault, mine and Jason's. But love itself isn't wrong. We just hope you can give us your blessing." I understood now. She was deliberately blurring the timeline, pretending that after her abortion years ago, she'd conceived again and given birth to Jason's child. She probably didn't know that just yesterday, Jason himself had come to see me, calm and self-assured, and said, "If you marry into the Lee family, Joanna, you mustn't make things difficult for Diana. For your own happiness, she's even willing to give up the baby she's carrying. I can't disappoint such a kind woman. So Joanna, in the future you'll be my first wife and Diana will be my second. Her child will call you mother too. This is completely normal in High City. Successful men often have multiple wives. I hope the two of you can live in harmony." I'd known in my last life that those two were out of their minds, but I hadn't realized they could reach an even greater level of insanity. Especially at that moment when the little boy sitting beside Diana suddenly gasped, his small hands clutching his throat before collapsing to the floor. My medical instincts kicked in instantly. Without thinking, I rushed to his side and began first aid. The child was clearly having a severe allergic reaction. His throat tissues were swelling rapidly. He needed to be taken to the hospital immediately. As I worked frantically, Diana, who had just been sitting calmly sipping coffee moments ago, suddenly burst into tears, her expression pale and pitiful as she threw herself into the arms of a man who had just arrived. "Jason, please save him," she cried weakly. I only wanted to bring our son to meet Joanna first, but she deliberately fed him mango. I told her again and again that Kaka is allergic to mango. Jason's eyes went bloodshot with rage. He glared at me, his expression murderous, as if he wanted to tear me apart on the spot. Without a word, he lunged forward, his hand swinging toward my face. But before his palm could land, I caught his wrist, pressing down on a key nerve point. Jason let out a sharp cry of pain, his face turning ghostly pale as sweat poured down his temples. "Really?" I said coolly. "You have no idea how much medical students like us suffer during training, do you? Back when we were students, our professor used to joke that one day we'd have to be strong enough to carry an entire cow on our backs." Jason shouted furiously. "Joanna Turner, how could you lay a hand on a child? That's despicable. Why didn't I see before how cruel you really are? It seems I'll have to stay away from you for a while longer." Before he could finish another word of that self-righteous rant, I snapped, "Shut up. Take him to the hospital now," I barked. My patient was gone. While the doctors were treating the boy, I hadn't yet left when Diana, still crying, grabbed my arm, demanding an explanation. It wasn't long before Jason's mother and sister burst into the emergency room, wailing dramatically. "Oh, my poor grandson," his mother sobbed. "My heart is breaking." Anna Lee glared at me with open hatred while Jason wrapped an arm around Diana's trembling shoulders, gently comforting her. Diana looked up at me with a terrified expression, then quickly buried her face in Jason's chest, pretending to be helpless. Jason's face hardened. "Joanna Turner, apologize right now." I didn't even bother acknowledging the lunatic couple. I stood up to leave, but Jason grabbed my wrist, yanking me back. As we struggled, a confused voice suddenly came from behind. "Director Turner, what are you doing here? The department meeting's about to start. We've been waiting for you." I turned around and saw a group of new interns approaching, one of them being little Yang, who had joined the hospital just last month. Seizing the chance, I told them to pull me away from the Lee family's madness, then used the distraction to walk off. Behind me, Jason's bewildered voice echoed. "Wait, did you just call her Director Turner?" One of the interns eagerly replied. "Yes, that's right. Director Turner was just transferred here from North City Hospital. She's one of the top graduates from North City Medical University, and the last student personally mentored by Professor Trin before he retired." By the end of the day, as I stepped out of the hospital gates, I saw Jason waiting near the entrance. So it's true, he said slowly, his tone almost amused. You've been reborn too, Joanna. No wonder he had seemed so certain of himself lately. In our previous life, when I had gone hiking with Director Gao, a sharp rock had sliced my ankle. A young female doctor had treated me, her movements precise and efficient. I had been so fascinated by her skill that when I returned home, I'd secretly practiced stitching for months. I realized then that beyond embroidery, a needle could open an entirely different world, one just as delicate and powerful. When I later told Jason that I wanted to study medicine, he'd sneered. If you ever become a doctor, Joanna, the pigs on my farm will start climbing trees. Now, I looked at him with utter disdain. Well, I am a doctor now. Tell me, can your pigs climb trees yet? Jason's face flushed red, but he still had the audacity to scold me. So you've been reborn for a while, haven't you? Why didn't you come find me sooner? You knew I was about to meet Director Gao, and you also knew she only likes the clothes you design. You did this on purpose to make things difficult for me, to force me to beg you, didn't you, Joanna? Everything I'm doing is for our future. Don't you want to live the life of a powerful, respected wife again like before? Quit this hospital job and come back home. Start sewing again and you can take care of my mother while you're at it. You've been a doctor for years. You should be good at caring for the elderly. It's perfect. I was absolutely disgusted. I had always known he was ungrateful, but I hadn't realized until now how pathetically self-absorbed he could be. At that moment, several colleagues began leaving the hospital, passing by in small groups. Their curious glances flicked between us, wondering why I was standing at the gate with a strange man. Jason, thinking he could take advantage of the moment, reached for my hand with a confident smile. My expression froze cold. I slapped his hand away. Take one more step and I'll call security. This is a military hospital. One guard here could put you flat on the ground 3 times over with one hand. Then I looked him dead in the eye and added, and stop flattering yourself. I'm married. Jason froze in shock. Impossible, he stammered before letting out a derisive laugh. You can't have married anyone else. I did, I said calmly. I'm legally married. My husband is recognized by national law. Got a problem with that? Who the hell do you think you are? As I finished, I turned to see Andrew striding toward me. He reached out, took my hand firmly, and interlaced his fingers with mine. Andrew didn't care how many people were watching. He clasped my hand tightly, his presence warm and steady. And in that moment, happiness flooded through me. I thought you weren't coming back until tomorrow, I said softly. He lowered his head, his voice rough but full of affection. I missed you, so I drove all night to get here. Behind us, Jason shouted furiously, trying to follow, but Andrew's security officer stopped him in his tracks, keeping him a full 10 meters away. I could still hear Jason's hoarse scream echoing through the air. Joanna Turner, you can only marry me. You belong to me and no one else. Andrew gently ran his thumb along my fingers and gave a faint mocking smile. Delusional, he muttered. After being apart for so long, our reunion felt like 100 honeymoons all over again. Every time I couldn't help but think, if a medical student like me ended up dying from exhaustion in bed, it would be a rather embarrassing way to go. But Andrew always remained calm and gentle afterward, pulling the blanket over me. Honey, he teased. You're overthinking again. Your professor said. You're his toughest student, the strongest too. 2 months later, I voluntarily requested a transfer to a branch institute, so I could continue both my research and teaching. By the time I returned to Deep City, it was late autumn. Not long after, my colleagues told me about a strange man who appeared at the hospital gates every single day. Rain or shine, always standing there from the start of the workday until the evening shift ended. He never missed a day. Little Yang, one of the interns, described it vividly. At first, the security guards thought he was some kind of stalker, but then they realized he just stood there like he was waiting for someone, so they stopped bothering him. But Director Turner, you should have seen it. This tall, handsome guy suddenly started crying. It was so creepy. I got goosebumps. The next morning, as if on cue, Jason was there, standing in front of the hospital gates, blocking my way. The guards immediately grew alert, but I waved them off, signaling that it was fine. Joanna, he blurted out, his voice trembling. I was wrong. I was arrogant and blind. Please forgive me. Come back to me. He spoke so fast, afraid I'd tell someone to throw him out. His eyes gleamed as tears streamed down his face. In our last life we were husband and wife for years. We even had a son together. You have to marry me again. We already had our marriage certificate. Leave him. I don't care about anything else. I'll marry you. Promise. I looked at him calmly, tired of the scene, my patience thinning. Jason, I said, when you ran away on our wedding day I was overjoyed. In this life my greatest fear was that I might have actually married you. So the moment you disappeared, I went to the city and took back our marriage registration file. He froze, stunned. I continued. And now my husband and I have been married for years. We have a lovely daughter. She's sweet, confident, and never has to cower to please her father or grandmother, because everyone in our family adores her. Jason's lips twitched as if he wanted to speak but couldn't. His eyes grew red again. Joanna, I know I was wrong. I only meant to stay away for a few years. I never intended to abandon you. Every year I wrote you a letter, but I just found out Diana stole them all. You see, it wasn't my fault. Please, Joanna, give me another chance. Think of our son. He looked exactly like me. He was so talented, so bright. Please, I'm begging you. I really know I was wrong this time. I'd had enough. His pathetic persistence disgusted me. But remembering my promise to Andrew, I held myself back. Andrew had once told me, even if it costs me a disciplinary review, I'll make sure that man never bothers you again. I looked Jason straight in the eye. Jason, you don't miss me. You miss what I could do for you. I was useful. I managed your home, advanced your career, and made sure you had the right connections. You only realized who your precious Diana was once you had her. And she wasn't half as good as you'd imagined. You just can't stand that no one will ever give you as much as I did. The thought of that so-called son of his, who supposedly looked exactly like him, only made me feel even more relieved that I'd escaped. I was completely cold inside now. That boy resembled him in every way. Selfish, calculating, and utterly devoid of warmth. He was the kind of man who always wanted the whole world to step aside for him. Whether he regretted what he'd done or not no longer mattered to me. In my past life, I had fulfilled every duty of a wife, a mother, and a daughter-in-law. But marrying into the Lee family had been the most revolting mistake of my entire existence. He would never understand how day after day, night after night, I had lived in regret. In the end, just the sight of his face made my stomach turn. Even now it still did. Jason slumped to the ground, his expression blank, muttering to himself in disbelief. How could this be? I turned away in disgust, not bothering to look at him again. Jason Lee, don't ever let me see your face for the rest of my life. Trust me, you don't want to find out what my husband does to people he considers enemies. After that day, Jason and his entire family disappeared completely from my life. Andrew, however, couldn't quite hide his jealousy. Are you sure you're not just upset I didn't get to punch him? He asked, his tone half teasing, half sulky. I shot him a glare. Don't be ridiculous. He's not even worth a single hair on your head. It wouldn't be worth ruining your career over a man like him. That was all it took. My lion of a husband immediately melted, grinning like a spoiled child, finally soothed. Later, I made a point of befriending Director Gao again, but not to give her clothes this time. In my previous life, she had suffered from severe asthma and nearly lost her life during a business trip. This time I gently reminded her to take extra precautions. She was deeply moved and thanked me repeatedly. During our conversation, she shared an amusing story. A few years ago, one of her subordinates had made a habit of gifting her expensive designer outfits at every opportunity. The styles were flashy, trendy, and completely not her taste. They irritated her so much that she finally transferred him out of the central department just to get him out of her sight. After that, she heard he'd gone into private business in Deep City, one of the first places to open during the reform era. That in itself wasn't unusual, but apparently he'd taken out high-interest loans to get started and invested in several dead-end projects that no one believed in. Naturally, he couldn't stay afloat. He lost everything. His mistress left him a letter before taking their son and disappearing. In it, she confessed that the boy he'd raised all those years wasn't his biological child, but the product of her first love. That man had returned, and she still loved him. She thanked Jason for his generosity in accepting her back then, and hoped he would understand. She was taking what little money was left to raise her child, who had once called Jason Dad. When Jason's elderly mother found out the grandson she had doted on for years wasn't really her blood, the shock caused her to suffer a stroke. She was rushed to the hospital but passed away soon after. The broken man who was left behind took a few letters and went to sit by the shore, staring blankly at the crashing waves. No one ever saw him again after that. When I heard the story, I didn't feel much of anything. It was just another tale of poetic justice, one of many in the world. In the years that followed, Andrew missed our daughter terribly. Every summer and winter break, he'd find some excuse to coax her into staying with us a little longer. Both sets of grandparents constantly fought over her. And though I found their tug-of-war a bit exhausting, it was the kind of warmth I'd once dreamed of having. One evening, half teasing, I asked him, "Do you ever think about having another child?" Andrew laughed, wrapping his arms around me. We had already agreed. One child, boy or girl, doesn't matter. That way, our love won't be divided. She'll have all of us, every bit of affection we can give, Joanna. The only person I could ever love besides our daughter is you. Any more than that, and my heart would be too full to share. And so hand in hand we spent our whole lives together. Side by side, growing old with each other. He protected the borders. I healed lives on the front lines. At 82, Andrew passed away peacefully in my arms, surrounded by our children and grandchildren. While sorting through his belongings, I found a small photograph tucked into the pages of one of his favorite books, our wedding photo. Two young people pressed close together, faces tender and a little shy. On the back, written in his strong, unmistakable handwriting, were the words, "Joanna, my love forever."